Hi everyone. So today I want to go off topic. I had like a subject in mind following the figure of the book that I do usually. But I had a different inspiration. Today I would like to talk about relationship. I'm not officially in a relationship, but I've been trying to reignite the love that I had with my ex, and something just glimpsed into my consciousness with the last interaction I had with her, which was somehow heated. And what comes to mind is that somehow I'm a Samsung phone and she's a iPhone. And although a lot of people have really strong opinion as which one is best, I feel that it's just different. And then when one of us is trying to use or interact with the other gadget, because it's a different operational system, we're struggling. It's not functioning the same way as we used to. The application are not disposed the same, the setting are not the same, and because of that, it creates friction, it creates frustration. And so in relationship, I feel that either it's just me and my partner, or maybe it's men and women in general, or masculine and feminine in general. But we're operating from a different system. There's definitely fundamental mistake that we're taking for granted, and that creates a lot of friction and suffering when we're trying to be in a relationship together. It could be also with your boss, with your family, or with your friend. What I'm trying to get is that we need to understand which is our own operational system, how we function, and most people are able eventually to figure this out. So we have better emotional regulation, better digestion, better physical conditioning. But when we interact with someone else and we're trying to live our life with them, then we have to adjust. We cannot act with our partner the same way as we act with ourselves. Either about diet, either about lifestyle, about subject of conversation in social setting. And at the same time, because it's likely that our partner or the people we're interacting with will impose their belief or their their way of being on us, that we are able to speak and verbalize what is more attuned with herself without making them believe that it's their fault or there's a problem with either one. It's to explain that the difficult conversation is about explaining that we're different and that we need something different when there's friction. It doesn't happen all the time. There's many incompatibility which doesn't create friction, but there's also a lot of incompatibility which do create friction. And when those incompatibility do create friction, meaning that somebody is doing something or saying something which we don't like, and which creates a contraction, it's not necessarily their fault. Our trigger, it's our responsibility. Them triggering us, they're not responsible. They may be the cause, but they cannot be responsible. Their trigger is just coming from usually your trauma or upbringing or the way we were raised, or education, etc. And if we don't like something, it's just personal to us, because there's probably a lot of people around the world that doesn't share a belief. There's probably a lot of people around the world that doesn't agree with what we like and what we don't like, and that's good. That's okay. It's good that there's differences. And if a culture, for instance, in India, you can drive through the red light and then just look around and then drive slow. But in the United States, you wouldn't allow somebody to drive over the red light. at least not without being in an infraction. And it's the same thing. If an American, really proud of her body, walked to a temple, it would be, even if she felt more comfortable with her body, it would be disrespectful for her to walk in a temple or even in a house of somebody that is more conservative. And so we have to not impose our belief, and being able to express our dislike, so the person understand that when they interact with us, that they are able to be more careful to the thing that they're triggering us, not because it's their responsibility, but just because it's a sign of respect, meaning that I don't smoke cigarette, and I cannot force anyone or the whole world to stop smoking. But at the same time, if somebody smoked next to me, I can explain that I don't like, and to blow their smoke on the other direction, or even better, to not come toward where I'm sitting, so I can breathe fresh air without smelling cigarette. And it's not for me to blame them, to shame them, because they're still smoking cigarette, and I think it's not healthy for their lungs. It's not for me to decide what is good or wrong for them. I'm just triggered because for me, I don't like the smell, but they're causing my trigger. They're not responsible. I can just share what I don't like, what is uncomfortable for me, for what I don't enjoy. And then I have two options: ask them politely to be careful, or to subtract myself from the situation, from the environment, or from the location, because they don't want to change. But I don't need to be frustrated. I don't need it. And it's not meaning that I'm walking away, that I necessarily have to hate this person, that I have to be energetically distant from this other human being. If for them they feel entitled that this is outside, and then it's a public space and they are allowed to smoke, which is probably true in most places, then I can just ask for compromise. I cannot give an order. I cannot impose my belief on somebody else who's not open and ready to make an agreement with me. And I think in partnership there's a lot of failure because we are believing that our partner is responsible to not trigger us. And love is beautiful, and love is blind, and there's a lot of compromise that we can make to make a relationship work. But when we are trying too hard to please a partner, which I've done in the past, because I think part of me is a people pleaser, like many of us, what happened is that the person, and this is really subtle and really most of the time unconscious, I'm not saying people are bad for doing that, but a people pleaser not necessarily create sustainable peace, but most of the time when there's an underlying roots of the person that we're trying to please is not feeling safe, what happened is that they become more sensitive and are more expressive about what they dislike, and then us pleasing them eventually becomes a gel, meaning that there's always more expectation for us to change our own behavior to please them, and then eventually there's more coming toward us to fix, to change, for them to not be triggered. It's like somebody who is highly allergic to like everything or too many things that is comestible, and then as a restaurant owner, you wanna invite them. It's like, yeah, okay, we'll cook without chili. Okay, we'll cook without gluten, and then if, and it's not everyone, but if people are overly sensitive, they become overly demanding. And what happens is that it's their responsibility to care for their health. And if you're not um, marking your boundary as the restaurant owner, then you are more likely to disappoint them and to frustrate them because their expectation will keep rising. And and then at the end, you are cooking nothing because they're allergic to everything. And there's people who are sensitive, and it's not a good thing, but it's a reality, and we have to accept that. But they have to understand that it is their responsibility to know if it's safe for them to go eat to certain restaurant. And if it's there's a buffer zone where the restaurant is a conscious restaurant, a healthy restaurant, and you have a lot of intolerance, a lot of allergy, and it's like extremely important for you, because I also many times live on a specific diet. But when I do go out eat with friends in a restaurant, I just bend my rule, and it doesn't matter even if for my digestive system it's not optimal. So I am flexible. But if you're not flexible for any reason, either by principle or for health reason, then it's the person's responsibility to know if the location you are deciding to go eat, either by personal interest or because your friend are inviting you, that you're not putting unloading all your expectation toward the restaurant owner to please you, to satisfy you based on all your sensitivity. And this is compatibility. Compatibility is that when we met a partner, there's a preliminary uh, there's a period that we have to figure out naturally but with ease, if the person we would like to date is open to our sensitivity or is compatible to our lifestyle or to our mentality or way of being in intimacy, etc. And then that we can approach in peace and in love the little friction or the little trigger, and the easing of knowing each other, we eventually, even if there's like tension or friction, we are able to eventually meld together and to be one unit. um, but when we are imposing, I feel that we are forcing the other, even if if the person is too malleable, meaning that they're not feeling comfortable to change, and they used to be, they're like me, like before, just trying to please, then it's just a ticking bomb for the relationship to backfire. And I think, and I might be wrong, I think that's why maybe there's long-term relationship where which appears to be trouble-free for some time, with mostly one strong character, one partner that has a strong character, and one more people pleaser that is kind of more introvert, more low profile, and not asking for much and bending a lot, and eventually they broke or disappear from the relationship without noticing it. And I feel that the reason is just what I'm sharing, is that it appears fine from the person who's demanding, and then they don't see any red flag. It's like, oh, this is my perfect partner, and then after that they just disappears, because some people pleaser in general, are not good at speaking their boundaries, and so they're not good at claiming or expressing their yellow. And so for the other person it appears green, it appears fine, but we're just suppressing it and eventually, without noticing, it's red, and then we're giving up. We're giving up because it was a drop that overflowed the cup. And by not being able to express our yellow, and the other person was unaware or unable to self correct, so to ask us less. So it's not necessarily their fault, but at the same time, we consciousness, being aware, it's to be aware even as people are not speaking. There's always energy in everything, and I feel learning the skill of reading energy, reading people through their energy, is a lot more accurate than trying to figure out what they mean based on what they say, because there's people who are not saying much. I lived in Asia now for over 12 years, and there's this belief from Westerners. I live in Westerners community, and there's this belief like, well, if the locals are not saying anything, then they continue pushing boundaries. Westerners are continuing to push boundaries, and it can be about anything. It could be like just like me being topless on the road, and there's place where it do appear that it's totally fine, like on the beach and community which were a lot more open-minded compared to, for example, a community that's Muslim or where the religious belief is much stronger. And so exposing ourselves, male and female, is not well seen. They are not going to say anything most of the time because Asian culture are polite and people pleaser. But at the same time, when they speak up or at a temple, you can see sign where you're not allowed to do 15 different things. When Asian are putting sign up, it's because a lot of people have crossed boundaries too many times already, and you already reach the red zone of limit where people are saying stuff, and then instead of reading the room, instead of reading people, we are waiting from the Western world. We thinking that, oh, they should say something if they don't like it. But this is not how it works in Asia. They are not like, even toward the authority, a lot of Asian countries are not allowed to speak ill toward the authority without consequences. And so it's natural that their bringing is that when they feel something uncomfortable, they're they don't have the tools and the ability to speak that something is not right and to be respected for what they feel foreigners should be doing or not doing in their homeland. And so in a relationship, we have, yes, it's better if we're able to speak it up, but it needs big maturity. It needs a lot of education because speaking, most of us will speak it, but if we're not educated to speak properly, then we're going to create a fight, a power struggle, because we're going to blame, we're going to attack, and we're going to defend ourselves. And that is no good for any relationship. And before we're able to do conscious communication, I think if we're expecting something from our partner that we know they're not ready yet, it doesn't help to put more pressure. But then speak to me. It's like there's a lot of partner where there's no communication system because one partner is a lot more articulated, more intellectual, more better with words, and the other one can feel stuff, but to be able to translate feeling and sensation into word that the other can comprehend or emotion is a skill on its own. And I feel I have some level of skill, but at the same time, I've been sometimes struggling with some partner who also had high level of skill of communication. And I think it's because of the operational system that I'm functioning different than my partner. Like A brand new iPhone is not objectively better in every category as a brand new Samsung phone or Android phone. But a lot of people prefer Android and a lot of people prefer iPhone. And that doesn't mean that if you prefer one or the other, that you cannot date somebody who has a different operating system. But if you want to have a relationship of peace, a healthy relationship, we have to accept our differences and act differently when we interact with this other personal system. We have to learn those differences in a way that we have to be bilingual in a personal system. If I speak now in English, I'm also fluent in French, and I can speak decent Spanish and also a couple hundred words of other languages. I create friction with someone that is not fluent saying English, and say that somebody speak 1,000 words in English or even less, 100 words. If they're making the effort to communicate with me, and I'm obviously the one that has better vocabulary, then I have the power to lower my level of English and speak with an accent, so maybe understand better with less word. I fucked it up. I'm just like broken my English. But I see a lot of people speaking to foreigner or to locals in foreign country, and then they are speaking few words, and the other person go with full extensive sentences in English, totally not matching the level of their English. And because they speak fewer words or they made sentences a minute ago, they say, yeah, they can speak. It's like there's so many different level of knowing a language. And if there's a language barrier, then there's no communication. But the one who has more knowledge in English is the only one who can, in the moment, break it down so more information is shared for communication to happen. And if instead you're frustrated, you're like, you're I don't know, hyperventilating, and you are expressing more than the person can perceive or receive, then the person is overwhelmed. And it's the same with emotion. There are Emotion is a language on its own. It's a language on its own, and it's important to know who is more fluent in speaking their emotion, and for the person who is more equipped, more skilled, more emotionally intelligent, not necessarily to lower, but to match the ability of the other person, because the other person can be really smart, like somebody who's smart in a different language than you speak, but because the common language is X, then it's your primary language, but it's not their primary language. So even if they're really smart, they have to speak through the funnel of a lower level of intelligence, which you read on yourself. Meaning that, like, say my Spanish is at, I don't know, 40-50%. If somebody speak to me at my level, then I can have conversation for hours. But if somebody speak like I'm a native Spanish speaker, then I'm overwhelmed, and I'm using a lot of energy just trying to figure out what they're saying. And then at the end, it's like there's not much that can come out of me to continue or to entertain the conversation, because there's too much of a gap. And so if we agree that the most important part is connection, then we have to make sure that the intention is not just to be heard, but to be understood and to be connected with whoever we're sharing with. And this is no matter if we're using our intellect with languages or if we're using something more emotional with our partner or other human being that we care about. And when we are able to level up based on the other person's ability, and sometimes it's not better or worse, so sometimes it's different operational system like an iPhone and Samsung, we are speaking the language and then more is happening. When we're imposing our way to somebody who is not familiar or is different, then there's protectiveness, reaction, and closeness. And closeness is the opposite of connection. And then we're frustrating because we're trying. It's not about intention. In both, most of the time, both people's intention is to be connected, to understand, and to bond. But when we're imposing and we're not aware that their capacity is unable to match up with us, and we're not able to lower our difference in paradigm or system or language, then there's a lack of communication. Even if we're using words, we have to use words for which we know that the other person won't understand the way we mean it. And if it means that we're using different words which are less correlated to what we really mean, but there's more chance that they're gonna understand something, that if we use words that are fancier, are more spiritual, but they're not ready, or they don't understand those words, then we're wasting time, we're wasting saliva, we're wasting energy, and then there's friction, and then there's disagreement, and there's frustration, and there's pain. We don't choose, nobody choose the way we were brought up. Nobody choose the trauma that affect us. We have to learn ours. We have to accept and heal our own. And at the same time, we have to understand that other people have their upbringing, their trauma, and their own confusion. And if we feel that this person, for any reason, if they're for your boss for promotion, our partner for deeper relationship, our friendship, we have to know with ease, with flow, and with softness, to know this person is actually compatible with us for deepening the connection, and to know if we have the capacity to navigate the little friction that may happen in any relationship, to bring more closeness, more growth, more magic. And yeah. Yeah, I felt good with this video. I don't know, it was really spontaneous. I had an agenda, I had an intention, but I felt that this was alive within me. And then I'm trying to figure out love, I'm trying to figure out myself, I'm trying to figure out life. And it doesn't mean because I had done a long, extensive journey in the inner world that I'm not confused with the messiness of the outer world. Part of me is back into dating, into socializing, and into finding a way to make money, all because I feel there's more for me to learn than secluding myself. I was really at a point when my life, after 7.5 years in the spiritual journey, I thought that there was nothing left for me to learn, and that I either wanted to go isolate myself alone in a mountain, and the plan B was to find an ashram, or an ashram, for the one who doesn't know, it's kind of not a temple, but a place where highly spiritual people go isolate themselves to do self practice, and sometimes there's a teacher or a guru, and sometimes there's not. And and I had this revelation from going to another ashram where there was 5,000 people, and it was Ama Ashram in Kerala in the south of India, and I was supposed to stay 4 days, and I ended up staying 9 weeks, and I didn't like it. I was triggered like every couple days, and I didn't left because I didn't know. After 7.5 years, I in myself thought that I became untriggerable, and then over there I was triggered all the time in a really subtle way. By I was not in a relationship, but it was just the people I met. It's such a hectic place. It's 5,000 people, but there's a lot of, because it's kind of an ashram where they refuse nobody, and a lot of people which have uh, what normal society would label as mental illness are gathering there because they have nowhere else to go, and Amma feeds and loves everyone, and so she's a hugging saint. Her sharing, her way to connect us with God is that she give us a personal hug, and sometimes she can do that. Most of the time, she do that 8 to 12 hour day, but she go on tour around the world and sometimes do that up to like 24 hour plus in a row. And I felt some magic with her, but at the same time, you're in the middle of this nest with thousands and thousands of crazy people, and it brought up emotion and sensation I forgot I the human experience could have. Like for 7.5 years, I spend mostly like 95%, to not say 97% of the time, alone. Like either alone without human, or in my bubble, surrounded by other people in their own bubble. I was not working, I was not dating, yeah, and then you believe you become untriggerable, or I believe I became untriggerable because I stayed away from all sorts of trigger, because I was not interacting with other humans. And suddenly I'm finding myself in this giant ashram with thousands of people. First time in like 8 years I'm interacting, or I'm surrounded by so many people. And most of those people have strong characters. Sometimes they're hectic, they're loud, and all this was thing that I didn't experience for so long. And then I have all those emotions. And then I realized at that point that I had to reintegrate somehow part of society. So I'm not working 9 to 5 in the city anymore, but I reintegrate society in a way that like I'm interacting with other people, I'm dating, I have friends, which I didn't have during the inner journey. And why I have that is because I realized for myself that before I started dating, before I started spiritual journey, I never spent more than a couple hours alone. And so aloneness was the void, aloneness was scary, aloneness was something to fear for my ego. And then I dive really quickly deep into this inner journey and move away or aside every distraction within a few months. And it was beautiful, but challenging in so many different ways, until being alone, being secluded, and being in my own bubble became my new comfort zone, became my new identity. I gained a lot of spiritual knowledge, a lot of spiritual power, mini power, and a lot of virtue. And it became my identity, which I self-identify with the few little time I was interacting with other people. And being more alone would have just sustained the comfort zone I already had. And what I realize is that we're not here to build a comfort zone bigger, stronger, which a lot of people do, either with money, either with the mansion, a family. And not there's nothing wrong with it, but we're here for growth, for expansion, for discovery, self-discovery. But this means to step out of the comfort zone and to come back in the comfort zone only for resting, and then go out of the comfort zone, and then there's expansion, growth. The same thing I shared in other video about muscle growth. It's emotional hypertrophy, or maybe there's spiritual hypertrophy, where we challenge ourselves to the point of feeling sore, and then we rest, and then we feel bigger, stronger, better, and then we re-challenge ourselves. And I feel that what I have gained in the spiritual journey allow me to reintegrate society, to integrate social connection, reintegrate relationship from the heart with a partner in a much more healthy way. Healthy for me, but also healthy for the people who are around me and the whole world. I feel that raising consciousness is removing the poison from us inside our mind, so we can be one grain of oil in the matrix instead of one grain of sand. Becoming, I think there's a flow where society is going, and there's a lot of negativity we observe, and today is AI, robotic, and maybe third world war, and maybe aliens, but there's a lot of negativity. And I feel the rise of consciousness, understanding and being grounded, being healthy, being just less affected by the noise of reality, allow us to not add more fire or more oil into the fire of what we're serving in social media and the news and on everyone's life. There's love missing, there's patience that's missing, there's peace that's missing. We want everyone else to change because part of us think that we're perfect, or that we believe it's not our responsibility for us to create pain in others. It's always others that are responsible for our own pain. And we just need more softness. Alright, I think 38 minutes is long enough. I didn't expect to be that long. I'm hungry, so I'm gonna go eat, and I'm gonna see you tomorrow. I've been doing well for this week. I have a 7 on 7, not 0 view, but it doesn't matter. I'm happy about myself that I have discipline to film. There's not much editing because that's what I like. That's why I decide to commit for myself. But I'm posting every single day, at least for now. And for if ever those videos getting watched, thank you. Hope you resonate. Subscribe if you want to watch more. And love yourself, love others, be patient, and I'll see you in the next one. Ciao.